This is Deborah Atkinson, and you're listening to Flipping 50, where I address your top questions and struggles. I share what to eat, how to move, and how to think to get the energy and the vitality you want in this second and better half. Stress is a bitch. Here's what to do about her. That's what we're talking about today. During midlife hormonal shifts, that you are more susceptible to the negative effects of stress since you've got more sources. Sleep disturbances, progesterone tanks, libido drops, and intimacy with your best friend could be an issue. Caught between anything from kindergartners to adult children and aging parents, we've got the perfect storm. It's definitely an obstacle to optimal energy and fitness. I've got expert help here today to offer some new insights. We're going to dive into how and why you can prevent the fat storage that's oh so much easier when you're under stress, and the brain fog and aging acceleration we all want to avoid. Registered herbalist and holistic nutritionist Danielle Ryan Broda has found her calling as an instructor of mycology at Colorado School of Clinical Herbalism and National Educator at Four Sigmatic. Danielle brings her passion and expertise in herbal medicine, clinical practice, teaching, formulation, and her deep love for fungi to the everyday magic of Four Sigmatic. Danielle, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So I have to tell all my listeners, they will guess, but I'm going to tell them Danielle lives in Boulder. So now I am dreaming about clear blue skies and air not populated by pollution and wishing I could go for a hike this afternoon while I'm talking with her. And I know exactly where she lives because there is a house that has my name on it in her neighborhood. But that's a whole nother story. So Danielle, stress has been so common. It's such a common denominator in every day in our modern Western world. And no one knows it better than a Flipping 50 listener. So let's talk about some of the natural ways we can support ourselves. What are some of the natural ways we can support ourselves? And probably we should introduce Four Sigmatic for any of our listeners who are not familiar with them about what the tie-in is here. So I probably jumped the gun a little bit. So why don't you introduce Four Sigmatic? You're going to do a much better job than I.
I would love to. So Four Sigmatic, we are a superfood wellness company, and understanding what Four Sigmatic means is a really great starting place to understand what ingredients we are trying to popularize. So it's a kind of heady name, but we're going to get into it together. So essentially, if you take all of the edible foods in the world and you study their nutrient density, some foods are horrible for you, some foods are amazing for you, and most foods are okay. So if you plot this out, what it looks like is a bell curve. And if you draw a mean in the center of that bell curve, every standard deviation away from the center is called a sigma. So you can go negative sigmas from the mean, and the foods get lower and lower in their nutrient density. So think corn syrup, GMO, processed foods and sugars, etc. And then in the positive sigma direction, the foods are getting better and better for you. They're getting more nutrient dense. And so 1 sigma from the mean of all foods, we have whole foods, which I like to explain as foods your great-great-grandmother would recognize. So an actual apple, an actual egg, an actual piece of fish, etc. And then 2 sigma foods, we're getting into staple foods. So these could be legumes or grains, quinoa. 3 sigma foods, we start getting into health foods. This is where dark leafy greens, brassicas, garlic, onions, lemons fall into. And then 4 sigma foods, so 4 standard deviations from the mean of all foods in the world. There's only about 50 foods that fall into that category. And they're essentially the 50 most researched, nutrient-dense superfoods on the planet. And at Four Sigmatic, we're committed to using all foods that fall into that category. And believe it or not, about 10 of those 50 happen to be what we call functional mushrooms. So we began by popularizing functional mushrooms, and we use other Four Sigma foods as well, which are often what we call adaptogens, this really wonderful quality of, or this category of herbs that greatly help us with dealing with stress.
Yay. Okay, sign us up. Where do we sign up? I did not know that. I did not know all of the details about the name. So I've always been so curious about that. I knew there must be a story of some kind. So I'm loving the definition. Thanks so much for pointing that out. So, and I think we can all agree that we want many more of those number 4 foods in our lives. So glad that you're here to talk about them. So we here at Flipping 50, we've discussed adaptogens. Some of you listening know and maybe have maca sitting on your shelf, ready to go into a smoothie at a moment's notice because of me. But a good review of what they are and how they help is always good. So what's the deal with adaptogens?
Yes, I love using metaphors. I find that it really helps give us a visual of what these maybe somewhat foreign herbs or fungi are actually doing in our body. So adaptogens are this group of herbs and fungi that essentially give us tools that build up our bodies so that we can better deal with both internal and external stressors before they come our way. So the metaphor I like to use is in a city, there's a reservoir. And in times of drought, we have this reservoir to be able to pull water from so that havoc doesn't break loose. And if you think of your body as a city having its own reservoir, I like to call it our vital reserve. What adaptogens are doing are building, they're filling up that vital reserve. So it's basically your own internal reservoir. So whenever stressors occur, which is inevitable, we have this pool to be able to pull from so that you can respond more efficiently and effectively and recover quicker from whatever that stressor might be.
We all need them. Okay, they're your superheroes, girls. I mean, what other thing is it? And so let's go into the adaptive part of it just a little bit. So the way I like to describe maca, and I want you, Danielle, to jump in and correct me a little bit if I need to be brought back into real life here. But the way I describe the role of maca is, for instance, in helping with cortisol, it's kind of, if you need it, your body's going to put it to use. If you don't need it, it's kind of no harm, no foul. But it's there to help rebalance that cortisol level and help you be more resilient.
Yes,
how am I doing?
I love this word. You're doing great. Resilient is such an appropriate word to describe what adaptogens are doing overall. And, they're called, the name is really fitting, right? They're called adaptogens. They're really looking to find this equilibrium in all of our bodies. And every one of our bodies is so unique. Of course, we have these common symptoms that we could relate to and that many of us deal with, but every body is unique. And when you take natural products like herbs and adaptogens, they're going to do something slightly different in your body based on what you're needing at that time of day, time of season, or time of year. So if you're really stressed, your body's going to need to pull from that vital reserve more. You're going to need this greater sense of resilience versus, there's no harm, no foul if you are building up that reserve during times of low stress, but you're basically creating this more solid foundation so that when you do need it, it's there for you.
Awesome. Good. I mean, we can all use that. We need the cape, right? Before we jump, we need the cape. All right. Now you mentioned, as you were talking about what you're doing and some of those, number 4 foods, you tossed out a term called functional mushrooms. So I want to unpack that a little bit. And medicinal mushrooms is another one that I've heard. So let's define those. And because this is really your personal secret power here. Enlighten us about how we can use those to our advantage.
Yes. So we're going to all become mushroom experts in the next minute here. But to begin, we're going to zoom out. And it's really important to understand that fungi are actually their own kingdom. So we're part of the animal kingdom, there's the plant kingdom, and then there's the fungi kingdom. And it's actually a huge kingdom. We know that there's at least 6 times as many species in the fungi kingdom as all plants on Earth. And I love just pausing after that fact, because you think about all of the fruits, vegetables, herbs, trees, grasses, grains that we're so familiar with in the plant kingdom, and there's 6 times as many fungi species. And as a culture, we know about so few. And they're abundant and so powerful. And as a Western society, I feel that we're finally ready to embrace these fungi. So we have this really large kingdom. And to break it down super simply within that, there are mushrooms that grow on the ground. And those are going to be the mushrooms that most of us might think of when we hear the word mushroom. So your culinary mushrooms, even poisonous and psychedelic mushrooms are mostly going to be those growing from the earth. And then what we're talking about are mushrooms that grow on trees. And they're called functional mushrooms. And they used to be called medicinal mushrooms. So we can actually use that same term, but we are starting to call them functional mushrooms to distinguish them from the world of psychedelics and psilocybin. And I think that's been the case because in the world of herbal medicine, medicinal is now so often conflated to be cannabis. And so now, as we shift into becoming more familiar with fungi, medicinal mushrooms are becoming more correlated with the illegal mushrooms, those psychedelic mushrooms. And what we're talking about are totally legal, safe mushrooms that grow on trees. There's actually 300 what we call functional mushrooms, and they're essentially mushrooms that have known and studied benefits to the human body. And within that big category of 300, we're mostly focusing on about 4 to 10. So there's so many there, and we're going to just start where we're at, start really simple. And in the supplement world and what's becoming popularized are kind of these big 4 players that we can dig into a little bit today.
Awesome. Okay, so where do we start? Where's the best place to begin?
So Reishi mushroom is the best place to begin. Reishi is known as
around. I'm literally, I got a haircut today, and I swear my hairdresser said something about that. I mean, it's like everywhere. People are dropping it. They're reading it, hearing it, seeing it. So why? What's the rage?
Yeah, with Reishi specifically?
Yeah.
Yeah, so Reishi is known as the queen of mushrooms, and has actually been used. So even though this word might be new to some of us in the West, we know that Reishi has been used for over 5,000 years by different cultures and traditions all across the world. And Reishi is really at Four Sigmatic, we like to give a word or a little bit of a character to each of our mushrooms to make them really accessible. And with Reishi, our word is chill. And if you think about our society, and especially our theme of today being stressed, most of us are dealing with some layer of chronic underlying stress. And I think that's why Reishi has become such a key player today, is it's such a vital root-based way of dealing with stress. So I really think it's helpful to think about the way our bodies evolved to deal with stress. And it was typically when an animal was coming to fight us. So you have this big animal coming to fight you, and in response, your body sends off all this, all these hormones, this adrenaline and cortisol rushing through your bloodstream to give you enough stamina to either fight off this animal or run for your life, fight or flight. And in that phase, your body is in survival mode. And it was actually a wise tactic that our body used to concentrate our energy to keep us alive. And yet we still respond in that same way. So now we're driving to work, someone cuts us off, boom, stress response. Or, your kid yells at you and boom, stress response. Or you get in a fight with your partner, boom. It's happening all the time. And we're dealing with this chronic layer of stress, and there's these side effects. So in that, when you're in that survival mode, the last thing your body's thinking of is, am I hungry? How's my digestion right now? Am I tired? All these other aspects of being a human become secondary. They take a back seat. And so in lieu of finding really vital, holistic ways to address our health and our stress long term, this is where Reishi really shines. So if people don't know where to begin with the world of fungi, I always point them towards Reishi. And it's truly amazing what symptoms that they don't even think are necessarily related to stress that begin to go away once the stress response has been tapered.
Love it. Okay, so talk to me about how do I get Reishi into my system? I know you've got one idea, so share that.
Yeah, so if you've ever seen Reishi, and I encourage everyone to Google image all of these mushrooms because it will truly blow your mind. They look so different than the classic portobello that most of us are used to envisioning when we hear the word mushroom. But Reishi is this big conky mushroom that grows on the side of trees, and it's really tough. So what's really unique about the world of mushrooms is these mushrooms, they can't be eaten raw. So you can't just chop up a reishi and add it into your stew. They actually need to be extracted in some way. And we don't have to go too deep into that. If you want to, we can. But the point is, never eat your mushrooms raw. You always want to extract them. So whether you are buying, you can buy actual reishi from different herbal sites, but you want to make a tea out of it, or you want to make a tincture out of it. And of course, my favorite way to use it is at Four Sigmatic, we have a reishi hot chocolate, and it's this totally guilt-free yummy beverage with Criollo Valley cacao, this amazing super antioxidant cacao, and 500 milligrams of reishi extract in it. And reishi is pretty bitter and earthy in its natural flavor. And so when you mix it with something like cacao, right, like chocolate, that's a bitter flavor that we all know and love. So it's such a easy and really nourishing. It's kind of like your own self-care, while you, instead of just popping a pill, you get to sit down and connect with that which is healing us. And something so beautiful about drinking our medicine is I truly believe as an herbalist that the medicine starts in our mouth, right? So when you taste a bitter flavor, it automatically signals your liver to kick into gear, right? So the way that, whether it's traditional Chinese medicine or Ayurveda, it's so important to taste that which is nourishing and healing you. And I love that about drinking your mushrooms.
Love it. And so if there was a great time of day to drink it, what would that be? Or does it matter?
So reishi is really different than other herbs that we might think about in the chill or stress category. It's not sedative in any way. So there's many herbs that we call nervines. So within the world of, our materia medica, so basically our whole herbal cabinet, it's helpful to put these umbrella categories over different herbs based on what they do. And so, for example, you have nervines, right, which are the herbs that support your nervous system. So think skullcap and passion flower, valerian, chamomile, things like that. And then we have, the adaptogen umbrella, which I think we're all more familiar with. And that's where these fall within. And so adaptogens, they're not stimulating or depressing, right? They don't have this direct action in the body like many herbs in these other categories do. And so what that means is you can take reishi any time of day. However, we put reishi in like a blue box and chill, and we have these little Z's whenever we sell our reishi products. So a really powerful time to take it is right before you go to bed, or in the afternoon and evening as a way to unwind.
Nice. Okay. Fantastic. Okay. What about on the flip side? Is there a Four Sigmatic product that would be better for earlier in the day or for focus, clarity?
Yes, there are two amazing fungi that I want to highlight here. And the first is lion's mane. Have you ever taken lion's mane, Deborah?
Yeah. Yes. Not enough like to say, okay, here's what it did to me. Here's what I loved. But I've tried them all. Yeah. I love the Four Sigmatic products.
Lion's mane is so cool. It has nothing to do with the mane of a lion. It's this white stringy fungus that grows on the side of trees like our functional mushrooms do, and it kind of resembles the mane of a lion. And we tote lion's mane as our think mushroom. And so really beneficial support for productivity and creativity. And we put a light bulb image every time we use lion's mane, because it's that idea in cartoons when you get that brilliant thought and the light bulb goes off above your brain. That's what lion's mane is doing. So if you've ever been in the zone and had those moments where you sit down on your computer and you bust out emails for 3 hours and you look at the clock and realize, wow, I don't know where the time went. That's kind of the feeling that lion's mane gives you. So this super powerful sense of honing in, of focus, of productivity, and such a great ally to take in the morning.
Awesome. Love that. So what about on the flip side? So if we were going to try to attempt to do that, say with coffee, because, a lot of listeners are probably doing that. There's that risk of a jittery feeling, a little anxiousness that can come from caffeine for a lot of people. So how does that compare with lion's mane?
So you can take straight up lion's mane and there is no stimulant in there. So you're not going to get any sort of crash or, down peak from taking a lion's mane tea. But the other thing that we do, which is really fun about Four Sigmatic, is we make mushroom coffee. And so what we're doing is we're using real coffee. So it's actual 100% organic Arabica coffee, and we add the mushroom extracts in there. And so I like to say half the caffeine, double the benefits. And we found that most of us are drinking coffee for either that brain support, right, to sit down and work all day. And so we have our best-selling coffee is the one with lion's mane in it. And then this other mushroom that is for earlier in the day or to give you a sense of energy in a physical way is this mushroom called cordyceps. And so lion's mane and cordyceps, these two big energizer mushrooms, lion's mane, brain energy, cordyceps, physical energy. And so most of us want that caffeine, that stimulation for one of those two purposes, if not both. So we do mushroom coffee with lion's mane, mushroom coffee with cordyceps, and then you can totally mix and match if you're looking for the benefits of both. But we're really like, okay, why are we all drinking coffee, and how can we cut out the negative side effects to coffee, which, just like you mentioned, is often this acidity in the stomach, this crash, the jitters, and then how can we make the coffee even more effective? So how can we hone in on the why of, the reason we're grabbing that cup of coffee in the first place?
I love that. Love that concept and the idea of, okay, still give me my cup, that warm, soothing habit that we all have. And I think we're as tied to that as we are to the caffeine kick. It's the anticipation of the kick that we're going to get and the clarity that we want, or the energy. So glad that you mentioned that kind of the ergonomic aid, the boost for physical activity. Love that. So anything else that we need to know about for introducing more mushrooms into our life?
I was just going to mention it's really difficult to start a new habit, no matter what it is. And especially if we're stressed out, the last thing we're thinking about is, oh, what new healthy hack can I bring into my life? And so
Right.
what we're really trying to do, and one of my life goals is to meet people where they're at, to make it really simple and seamless, to elevate what you're already doing. So whether we realize it or not, most of us have existing routines, and
Mhm.
you want to just upgrade whatever it is that you're already doing. And so that's where things like mushroom coffee or mushroom matcha or chai, or, we found that most people have a daily beverage of choice. And so it's not about starting something that you've never done before. Like if you don't drink coffee already, we're not saying, oh, start drinking coffee. It's okay. What do you already do? You already, wake up and turn on your Mr. Coffee. Do you already make a smoothie in the morning? What is it that you're used to doing? What fits into your routine? And then how can we upgrade? How can we turn it up a notch, like cranking up the radio to make you feel better in the most easy and simple ways possible? Little shifts, big results is what we're going for.
So good. Tiny habits, right? Pairing it, coupling it with something you're already doing. Awesome. Okay, so what's your favorite? I have to ask.
My favorite mushroom?
Yep.
It changes every day and every hour, I'm so glad you asked that, because so many of us will find a mushroom and hone in on it and say, oh, this is the thing that I'm going to take and it's going to support me forever. But hopefully, if you're really stressed out and you start taking reishi every day for a couple weeks, your stress response will have declined a bit and you might need something different. And so I always encourage with really everything in life, but continually tuning into your body and shifting whatever it is you do based on your changing needs. So for me right now, I'm going to bring up the fourth mushroom in kind of our big four that I haven't talked about. And it's a mushroom called chaga. And chaga is known as the king of mushrooms and is full of antioxidant properties. And I'm sure all of our listeners here know how important antioxidants are for many, many different things, especially different phases of life. And for me, I travel about 50% of my time and run around the country talking about mushrooms and herbs. And when you travel, it's extra important to make sure that your body is full of antioxidant properties. You're exposed to different people and bacteria and food and water. And I like to think about nourishing my body with antioxidants as you mentioned superhero a lot. And what I feel like when I take chaga, it's like your daily bodyguard. So when your immune system's so strong, when you're full of antioxidant properties, even if you walk into a room or, in my case, walk into an airplane with a bunch of people that might be sick or coughing on you, it's like that antioxidant rich, vital body isn't going to be a host for whatever ailment is going around. So traveling, people that might work in healthcare or schools or that live in big cities where there's a lot of pollutants or fires in the air, chaga is such an amazing daily ally.
So good. And I don't know if you knew this, but as we do this, by the way, listeners, this is early in September, but it's just about a week past 3 back-to-back trips that I took in August. And as I was connecting with Danielle and we were arranging this, I let her know I was packing them every time I went and taking them along. So, and doing it unknowingly. So not necessarily knowing I was boosting my immune system and supporting myself in that way. Just it's an easy way to make sure that you've got what you want in the morning in your hotel room before you start the day going out and charging.
I love that. Your intuition guided you and was like, bring this chaga with you. It knew.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Okay. So hardest question of the day that I ask anybody who guests on the Flipping 50 show is there a question that I should have asked you? And let me preface it a little bit with, let's say that our listeners are in the know. They've heard about the power of mushrooms, medicinal mushrooms, the health benefits of mushrooms. And I think my antenna might be up, but I feel like I'm seeing a little bit of it everywhere that, mushrooms support breast cancer risk reduction. I saw that, I swear, within the last 24 hours. And I think they're all there, but maybe they're not yet doing it. So now I'm going to ask you, that's who you're talking to. Is there a question that I should have asked you?
Wow, there's so many. I could talk about mushrooms for the rest of my life. I think,
And you will.
I think I will, yes. A really important question is what to look for when you're out in the world, and especially as mushrooms do gain popularity and we're seeing more mushroom things on the shelves. How do you know what to choose and why you're choosing what? And so a couple big things. What's that?
That's a great question. I wish I would have asked that. Okay. So what's the answer?
So there's a couple things I'm going to mention. I'm going to try to keep it to three golden pillars to look for. And the first is, this might sound silly, but what part of the mushroom are you using? And just a basic anatomy of fungi, there's actually three distinct parts to a mushroom. So there's the root system, which we call the mycelium. If we have any gardeners out there and you've dug in your soil, you've probably noticed this white stringy substance beneath the soil, and that's all mycelium. That's all the root system of mushrooms, and it's actually incredibly abundant. Every step that we walk upon on the earth, we are stepping on 300 miles of this mycelium network. So it's been called nature's internet. It's this incredible underground connective network of the root systems of mushrooms. So there's this mycelium, and then there's what we call the mushroom itself, which is actually known as the fruiting body. So that's like the apple of a tree. And then there's the spores, which are essentially mushroom seeds. And when you're out in the marketplace, there's different brands using all sorts of these three parts of the mushroom. And what I'm really passionate about and what we stand by at Four Sigmatic is using the actual mushroom. So we use that full fruiting body itself. And there's two big reasons for this. One is the tradition of using mushrooms. So this 5,000 years of mushroom use, we've always used the fruiting body. It was the only part that was above ground and accessible. So in all the cultures and traditional medicine books and lore and stories, it's always the actual mushroom. And so I love to say, we're not doing anything new. What my goal really is to revive a tradition. As an herbalist, we have so many allies, and we aren't taught about them in the way that I wish we were. And so it's really about keeping these medicines alive and reviving the way that they've always been used. And so using that full mushroom itself is really, really important. It's also the most potent part of the species. So it's both the science and the tradition speak to using the full mushroom itself. So that's number one. And then number two is mushrooms can absorb many things from their environment. So there's a whole different field that we could talk about another day called mycoremediation, which is this amazing science that we're finding fungi can actually clean up different toxins from the environment. So heavy metals and oil spills, really, really amazing research there. But why it's important when we're talking about health is we want to make sure that the mushrooms we're using are really clean. So organic being your first line of defense, make sure your mushrooms are organic so that you're getting the cleanest product possible. And then even beyond that, you want to ensure that whatever supplement that's a mushroom you're choosing to use has been third-party tested. And so you want it to be tested for things like pesticides and molds, heavy metals, irradiation, mycotoxins, to really to ensure you're offering, you're taking the cleanest product and you are actually benefiting your health rather than, taking something that could be contaminated. So the fruiting body, that it's organic and third-party tested. And the last thing is understanding what your mushrooms are growing on. And this might sound silly, but I'm sure you've all heard we are what we eat, and the mushrooms, they are what they eat. And so getting a mushroom supplement that's been grown on wood. So these are found, as we said, they're growing on trees. And so you want to make sure that you're getting a supplement that's been grown on the woods that they're found on in nature or wild harvested. And I'm making a point of this because many people today are growing mushroom on other substrates like oats or grain or rice, corn, soy, etc. And so you want to make sure so many of the compounds in these mushrooms actually come from the trees that they are growing on. So chaga, for example, this mushroom with all these antioxidant properties, many of those properties actually come from these compounds in the bark of the birch tree. Chaga is a parasite to birch trees. And so understanding where your mushrooms are grown, what they're grown on is really critical.
Wow. Such an eye-opener. Thank you so much. That was a great question. I'm so glad I asked it.
Awesome. So
Danielle, you are a wealth of information. Thank you. Thank you. What I'd really love to do is to have all listeners have the chance to try the Four Sigmatic for themselves. So I'm going to make sure that there's a link here in the show, and we've got all of the things that we referred to, all of the products and the ways that you can introduce it easily, like slipping it in instead of your tea or your coffee, and maybe making a good and healthier choice for yourself. So you can get that. You can also find out how to connect with Danielle here. Danielle, any last thing you want to add?
I'm so grateful just to be here and to be spreading the mushroom wisdom. I just feel they are such a powerful, easy ally for us all to start incorporating. They're so safe for so many of our bodies. And I'm just excited that we're embracing them and that we get to share their, what we call everyday magic with all of the listeners here.
So awesome. So listeners, I'm just going to guess you probably do have a question. Please leave it below the show link at flipping50.com/mushrooms. I love hearing from you, and I'm sure Danielle would if I needed to pass that along to her. So if this episode was helpful, please leave a rating in iTunes and then share it with a friend. Surround yourself with a supportive community of women on the same journey. To get the most from this week's episode, come back and check out today's show notes. Again, that's at flipping50.com/mushrooms, where you'll find the juicy way to get Four Sigmatic for yourself and the resources mentioned on the show and how to connect with Danielle and follow Four Sigmatic. So what are you waiting for? Let's start flipping 50 together.